Welcome to the Friday edition of the Morning Pitt here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Made it to the end of the week. I'm glad you could be here with us to start your day on a Friday as we head toward the weekend. Of course, you know what we always ask you to do. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Got the subscribe button right down there for you. You can click that, turn on notifications. You always get an alert every time we post a new video or we go live for one of our live streams, like we do every Wednesday night. We usually do the Panther-Lair show every Wednesday night at 8:30. You know, this past week and last week too, since Pitt had a Wednesday night game, we went live after the game for a post-game show. You never know when those things are going to start because you don't know when the game is going to end. And so if you want to make sure you never miss our live streams, you can just click subscribe, turn on your notifications and alerts, and you will always know when we go live. You'll know what we're doing here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You know the website, of course, Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Lots of Pitt sports coverage there for you. Football, basketball, and recruiting. Everything you need is right there at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Go check all that out. And, of course, get on the message boards, talk with other Pitt fans. That's what we always talk about here. As you head into the weekend, Pitt, another big game against Florida State, this time at home tomorrow at 3 o'clock. And a big game, not necessarily because Florida State looks like they're very good, but a big game because it's another opportunity for Pitt to keep the momentum rolling. I predicted that they would, after the Duke game, that they would win these 3 games. They won at Georgia Tech last Saturday. Of course, they blew out Louisville on the road Wednesday night. And now they have a chance to get another one tomorrow against a Florida State team that, like I say, hasn't been very good. The record's not very good. I know it's a conference team, can't trust the records and all that, but this is another game that Pitt should win. If they are who we think they are, and increasingly it's looking like they are, then they should win this game. I don't know how much they should win it by. I'll make my prediction at some point between now and 3 o'clock tomorrow, but they should win the game. It should be another victory to Pitt to get to, 14-6 overall, 7-2 in the ACC as they approach the midpoint of the conference schedule. And as we talked about on the Morning Pitt yesterday, we talked about it on the postgame show Wednesday night. If they can beat Florida State, again, taking care of business against a lower team, one of those, wherever Florida State is, quad 3, quad 4 teams, whatever it is. If they can do that, they'll be at a 7-2 start to the ACC schedule, which would be Pitt's best start ever in conference play since joining the conference. That 2013-14 team, the first year that Pitt was in the ACC, they opened their conference schedule 6-2 before they lost game number 9 and fell to 6-3. They've never had that good of a start through 8 games. They've never had a better start than 6-3 through 9 games. And there's an opportunity here to make some history. That was the only Pitt team ever to finish above 500 in ACC play. Now, this is season number 10, so you're looking at the last 9 seasons. Only one of those teams has finished above 500. Only one other team even finished at 9-9. That was 2 years later, the 2015-16 team. And so, you're looking at possibly getting into the record books here if you can get to 7-2 to start this year's ACC schedule. And as I've been kind of, as I was looking that up, doing the research on that, looking at Pitt's biggest wins, largest road margin of victory. We talked about that on Wednesday night, talked about it yesterday, that by beating Louisville on the road by 21, it was Pitt's largest margin of victory for a road ACC game since joining the conference. And start talking about some of these history things and record book things. I got to thinking a little bit, probably because I was looking at that 2013-14 team. That was not the last Pitt team to make the NCAA tournament, but the last Pitt team to win a game in the NCAA tournament. You remember they blew out Colorado, getting an upset in the 8-9 game, went on to play Florida and became a bit of a darling, really. It was sort of a sleeper pick that Pitt was going to, could potentially advance. They lost to Florida, but, probably the last really good Pitt team. You can debate about where they ended up that, pretty miserable year 2 years later. They followed up this season we're talking about by bouncing in the first round of the NIT, and then the next year they played that god-awful slog against Wisconsin. I think it was like 22-16 at halftime, and they ended up losing the game. It was played in the 40s. It wasn't good. It certainly greased the skids for Jamie Dixon's departure, although those skids were well greased at that point. I think for the fans, everyone was sort of ready to say, yeah, let's we don't need to watch any more of this. But I digress. That's not really what we're talking about here today. We're here to talk about that first Pitt team in the ACC. A 2013-14 team. Team went 26-10. They went 11-7 in the conference, finished 5th in the ACC. Like I say, got a number 9 seed. Upset Colorado in the, I guess technically it'd be the second round of the NCAA tournament. But, you could make a case it was probably the last, I don't even want to say great Pitt team, but the last really good Pitt team. I think you probably have to draw a line back to that one. And what's interesting to me is as we talk about best start to the ACC schedule and all that stuff, if you're drawing a line back to that team as the last good Pitt team, the line is connecting to this year. And I started, I guess it's because I was looking at that season and I started looking at the roster and thinking about that team. And I started wondering, and this is, sort of a fun little exercise. You can play with this with your Pitt basketball friends at the game tomorrow. And you could phrase it however you want it. Which team would win? Which team would you take? What's the better team? This year, 2022-23 team versus that year, 2013-14 team. Now, there are some of you out there that know instantly who was on that team. Let's do a quick refresher because I had forgotten the one or two of the spots on this lineup. I remember probably 3 or 4, but there were 1 or 2 that I was a little surprised by. The main starting 5 and 6th man for the 2013-14 Pitt Panthers. James Robinson at point guard, Cameron Wright at the 2, Lamar Patterson at the 3. And you could go back and forth on those two. Who was the shooting guard? Who was the small forward? It's kind of relevant on how you choose to line those guys up, but I'm going to go with that way for now, that Wright was the 2 and Patterson was the 3. Michael Young, as a freshman, was the 4, and Talib Zanna was the 5. All right, with your 6th man, really, even though he got hurt and only played... I just had this. How many games did he play? He only played 16 games. The 6th man, in terms of minutes, and he averaged almost 20 minutes a game in those 16 games that he played. The 6th man was Deron Johnson. Now, you could maybe make a case for Jamel Artis, but Deron Johnson, played 16 games before he tore his ACL that year, averaged almost 9 points per game, shot 34% from 3, 3 rebounds per game, was a decent player and was sort of the main bench option. So let's say that's your starting 5 plus your 6th man. And now you already know, the lineup for this year. You know who the starting 5 and 6th man are, I guess, on this year's roster. So how do you stack them up? And when I kind of line these guys up, 1-to-1, 2-to-2, and so on and so forth, I think there's one that jumps out as being easy and obvious. You say, well, yeah, you would definitely do that. You would definitely take that guy. The rest, this is tough. It's a tough challenge. And you try to remove some of the recency bias. We just watched this team beat an ACC opponent on the road by 20 or 21 on Wednesday night. And so, we're all feeling very good about these players and where they stand. Although, a couple of them like Nelly Cummings and Blake Hinson didn't particularly play very well in that game. But it's interesting when you start matching these guys up. I think the obvious one, the easy one that we don't even have to really debate for too long, is at the 5. Talib Zanna versus Federico. Zanna was the second leading scorer on that team, that Pitt team. He averaged 13 points per game, almost 9 rebounds. He was really good that year. And I don't think there's any question if you were going to, however you want to play this, if you want to say, well, who would win in a matchup or which player would you take, the answer is going to be Zanna. So, I think that's an easy one. We'll set the 5 aside. Because the other 4 spots in the 6th man are not quite so easy. Let's start at point guard. Nelly Cummings this year, James Robinson in 2013-14. And I think fans have come to appreciate James Robinson more over the years. As you came to accept him for what he was, which is a facilitating point guard, I think people came to appreciate his style of play and what he contributed to Pitt in the years that he was here. And that season, Robinson averaged 7.6 points per game, 4.1 assists, only 1 turnover per game, and he made 24 three-pointers. So, in 36 games, that wasn't exactly a big part of his game. The big part was averaging more than 4 assists per game and only 1 turnover, along with, close to 8 points per game. Nelly Cummings is averaging more than 10 points per game. He's averaging 4.5 assists per game. That's more than Robinson averaged. He's averaging 2 turnovers per game, 2.1 turnovers. So he's doubled up Robinson in turnovers. But he's also already, after just, 19 games, he's already surpassed Robinson's total of threes. And what you have in Nelly Cummings is a guard who can facilitate. And I know he's coming off a game where he didn't play very well, and he's been sort of streaky. He's struggled. The last few games he's sort of fallen off a little bit, but he's still averaging better than 10 points per game. He's still averaging 4.5 assists per game, and he's shooting pretty well from outside. He's knocking down threes. Who would you take? I might lean toward the current guy. I was surprised when I did the math on Robinson's numbers. I was surprised at how Cummings' assist numbers in particular, I was surprised at how Cummings' assist numbers surpass Robinson's numbers. Now, some of that is volume based. This is a team that shoots more. This is a team that makes more baskets. This is a team that scores more points. And so if your team makes more baskets, you're likely to have more assists. James Robinson also wasn't the only guy on the team handing out assists. He had 100 and I was just looking at this number and I was kind of surprised about this too. 148 assists. He was actually second on the team in assists. Lamar Patterson had 6 more assists than James Robinson did. So you take that into consideration too, of who he was playing with and how he's playing and all that. But on the numbers, on the scoring ability, they both were able to distribute the ball, Cummings and Robinson. When Cummings can score better than Robinson could, might have to go with the current guy. That one probably is a little bit easier than some of these others we're going to talk about. You take the 2 guard, and for this spot, look, if we made this, if I said, well, are you going to take Greg Elliott or Lamar Patterson? And I said, are you going to take Jamarius Burton or Cameron Wright? Those would be 2 easy decisions. You would obviously take Patterson. You would obviously take Burton. But we're going to make it a little bit more challenging. We're going to go with Greg Elliott versus Cameron Wright. And I think the biggest distinction here is that Wright was a really good defender. His stats, he averaged, actually remarkably close to Greg Elliott in terms of scoring, 10.5 points per game. Elliott's currently averaging 10.7. Elliott is actually rebounding at a higher volume than Wright. Elliott's averaging 4.4 rebounds per game, and Wright averaged 3.3 that year. And of course, Elliott's got a huge advantage in three-point shooting. He's made 43s already this season in 19 games. Cameron Wright, I think, made 10 in 36 games. So there's a huge advantage there, but you also have a defensive presence from Cameron Wright that you don't necessarily get from Greg Elliott. So it's probably, your choice between these two is probably based on your preference. Do you want the defensive guard, or do you want the guy who can knock down threes? I go back and forth. I'd like to have both of them, to be able to use them both in certain situations, but I'm going to leave that one to you. I'm tending toward the guy who can make threes just because I like points and scoring and all of that, but there's value in defense, particularly if you have a team with some of these other guys we're talking about. If you've got Nelly Cummings and either Jamarius Burton or Lamar Patterson, and you've got, maybe Blake Hinson who can knock down threes, and you've got Talib Zanna who can score inside, maybe you do go with the defensive guard as opposed to the three-point shooter just because you've got scoring in a lot of places. I still would like to have a lot of scoring anyway. And now we come to one, actually, we'll save the most challenging one for last. The 4. All right, and this is actually probably a little bit easier than you think it's going to be. Blake Hinson versus Michael Young. And the reason it's easier than you think it's going to be is that we're not talking about full career Michael Young. In 2013-14, he was a starter at the power forward position, but he was a freshman. Freshman Michael Young averaged 6 points and 4 rebounds per game, made 10 threes. Freshman Michael Young. Current Blake Hinson is averaging almost 16 points per game, more than 6 rebounds, and he's already made 40 threes. So I don't actually think it's that challenging. Like long-term, full career Michael Young, that might be a different story. Shoot, full career Jamel Artis, who was on this team as well, came off the bench, we might take over Blake Hinson. Even though Artis eventually became a point guard. Do you remember that? Somebody mentioned that the other day. I'd forgotten that whole era, really. Full career Michael Young, I might take over current Blake Hinson, but we're not talking about full career Michael Young. We're talking about freshman Michael Young, whose production was nowhere near what Hinson is averaging right now and what Hinson is producing. And he's coming off a rough game on Wednesday night, but I think he's shown enough that he can be a really good player. So I might go with Hinson in that situation. So before we get to the toughest one, and actually we can put it off again, we can go to the sixth man. I mean, we've got Zana as a definite for the 2013-14 team. These other spots we're talking about, I think I would take Nelly Cummings, and I would take current Blake Hinson, in favor of the 2022-23 team. Wright versus Elliott is a personal preference on whether you want the defense or you want the 3-point shooting. Sixth man is an interesting one. Deron Johnson played, like I say, 16 games. He averaged 19 minutes per game and 8.8 points, 3 rebounds, and he shot 33.8% from 3. Nike Sabandi is averaging 2 minutes more per game, but he's averaging 1.2 points less. He's averaging 1 rebound more, and his 3-point shooting percentage is 34.8 as opposed to 33.8. Very similar numbers between these two guys, and I think we're all very excited about Nike Sabandi right now because he's playing really well. He's definitely come on. If you were to limit these stats to the last 10 games, you might have it might favor Sabandi more. But sort of numbers to numbers, Sabandi playing 19 games and Deron Johnson playing 16. I mean, Johnson is every bit as effective, if not more so, than Sabandi. Sabandi might be a better defender. I don't particularly remember Deron Johnson being a great defender. That could be my memory just fading on it. And obviously we didn't see him over the course of a full season. Who knows if he had fallen off a cliff, or if it would have become more of a struggle for him as they moved deeper into ACC play. But that one's almost a push. I mean, quite frankly, just based on the numbers. As I sit here, and if I just said to you Nike Sabandi or Deron Johnson, you'd say Nike Sabandi. What are you talking about? But based on the numbers, I think Deron Johnson was more productive than I remembered him being. And again, only playing half a season, but still, that one might be closer to a push than I initially expected. But it really comes down to this matchup. It really comes down to these two guys, the clear best player on the team, the guy who makes it all go. And I don't know how you pick between Jamarius Burton and Lamar Patterson. And I put these guys, I say they both are sort of the 3 just because I want them to match up against each other. Numbers wise, Lamar Patterson averaged 17.1 points per game that year. Jamarius Burton is currently averaging 16.3. Lamar Patterson averaged 4.9 rebounds per game. Jamarius Burton is currently averaging 4.8. Lamar Patterson averaged 4.3 assists per game. Jamarius Burton is averaging 4.4. I mean, like, they are, separated by 0.8 points per game, 0.1 rebound, and 0.1 assist. I mean, they are that close to each other in terms of production, and I think they're that close to each other in terms of value to their team. And like, you know what? Let's look at the 3-point shooting. I didn't write this down as I was doing the prep here. Lamar Patterson, 80 of 206, shot 38.8% from 3. Jamarius Burton has shot fewer, so 38.2% with less volume. He's only attempted 34 threes. That's about 2 per game, whereas Patterson, 206 attempts in 36 games. Let's do the quick math here. That's about 5.7 threes per game. So Lamar Patterson, more of a threat from outside. I think Jamarius Burton can make those shots, but he tends to drive and pull up more than taking those shots from outside. That might be the difference, though. That might be the separator is, well, Patterson's more of a threat from 3. And it's not a huge separator to me. I mean, because they are both, Jamarius Burton is so important for this team. The more and more I thought about Wednesday night's game, Pitt made, all those 3-pointers, and Jamarius Burton had a whole lot to do with them. He had 9 assists that turned into 3-point baskets. He finished the game with 11 assists. 9 of them were 3-point baskets. He assisted on a Nike Sabandi 3 that turned a 14-13 Louisville lead into a 16-14 Pitt lead. And then on the next possession, after Louisville scored to tie it at 16, he assisted on another Nike Sabandi 3 that turned into a 19-16 lead for Pitt And they never looked back. They never lost the lead again. It was literally Jamarius Burton setting up Nike Sabandy for those shots. He also assisted on Guillermo Diaz-Graham's 3. He assisted on Nelly Cummings' 3. He assisted on one of Blake Hinson's 2 threes. And he assisted on 4 of Greg Elliott's 5 3-pointers. I mean, he was totally capable of taking over that game. And he did whatever he wanted against Louisville. He decided he was going to set up his teammates, and that's what he did. And if he had needed to take over and score 35 points, or if he decided he needed to score 30, or if Pitt needed him to score 30 to win that game, he probably would have scored 32. I mean, I think he was that much in control. It was really, really impressive. But Lamar Patterson could do that too. I have no doubt that Lamar Patterson could take over a game. And you look at his assist numbers, 4.3 assists per game. Burton is currently averaging 4.4, and this is fresh on the heels of putting up 11 dimes at Louisville. I don't have an answer to this question. I don't have an answer on which one of these guys you pick. If you were starting a team, and we can go with all the cliched sports talk radio, prompts here. If you were starting a team, who are you picking? Jamarius Burton or Lamar Patterson? Jamarius Burton, current 2022-23 Jamarius Burton, or 2013-14 Lamar Patterson? I don't have a good answer. I really don't, but it's fun to think about because, again, that was the last successful Pitt team. It was not the last Pitt team to make the NCAA tournament, but it was the last Pitt team to win an NCAA tournament game. And now this team is starting to tread in that on that ground. And again, with a win against Florida State tomorrow, they'll have the best start to the ACC schedule in Pitt history. Year number 10 as a member of the conference, they'll have the best start at 7-2. With a legitimate shot, and it keeps becoming more and more real and more concrete, chance at making the NCAA tournament. And the way they're playing, probably got a pretty decent chance of winning at least one in the NCAA tournament, if not more. I'm really interested to see how this team finishes out the next 12 conference games that they've got. I'm interested to see how they do in the ACC tournament, and I'm interested to see how they do in the NCAA tournament because I'm pretty sure they're going to do it and they're going to make it. And so it's fun to have those. We spend all week talking about Whippeal recruits and the wide receiver room, and we talk about the game on Wednesday night and all these different things. It's fun to every now and then just go off on a topic for a little bit. Just something different to get you thinking about something else in the Pitt world. Speaking of doing and thinking about something else, little quick announcement about the Morning Pitt. We're going to take next week off. Taking the family on a January trip. And so we won't have Morning Pitt videos next week. We won't have a live show next Wednesday night. Just kind of changing that schedule up. We'll be back on Monday the 30th. Will be our next Morning Pitt. So we're going to have a little bit of a break here. I apologize. You won't have anything to start your day with. You'll have to tune into the Sports Talk Radio or just read Panther-Lair.com for your daily Pitt fix. But we appreciate everybody who's watched these videos since we started them in August. It's been a lot of fun to do. Gives me something to talk about, something to think about, and helps me organize my thoughts a little bit. It may not seem very organized, but it is. Trust me. Look at all the notes I take. I write a lot of things down. Most of it's for this show. So I appreciate everybody who... You always see me glancing down like this, right? What's he looking at? Well, I'm looking at all the notes so I can give you accurate information. But I appreciate everybody who watches the video. I appreciate everybody who likes the video and subscribes to our YouTube channel. It's been a fun week. I expect Pitt to get another win over the weekend and really make this season pretty interesting. So hope you had a great week. I hope you have a good Friday. Enjoy your weekend and enjoy next week. I'll check in every now and then on Panther-Lair.com. But for now, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We're signing off with the Morning Pitt videos. We'll be back on Monday, January 30th. So enjoy your next week or so, and we'll talk to you that Monday. For the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.